Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Anxiety Chats. Today we have another anonymous story for you, and we're joined with co-host Kezia. If you would like to share your anonymous story with us, then head to the link of wherever you're listening to this podcast, or you can come onto the podcast and chat to me about your story in person. So welcome, Kezia.
Hi.
I'm excited to have you back. We absolutely love listening to your story. If you've not listened to Kezia's story yet, you just told it so well. And it can be really hard to articulate anxiety, but I just really resonated a lot.
Thank you. I'm excited to be back. Oh, thank you. Yeah, I think it was really interesting telling it and listening to it back and realizing how frustrated I was about the situation. But I found it was really beneficial to speak about it, and I thought it was very therapeutic as well.
Yeah, totally. And I think listening back to something, you can actually see it from and you can be like, hey, yeah, that wasn't okay, how I was treated in that situation. Like, you can kind of, I don't know, quite interesting listening back to your own story.
Yeah, completely.
So today's story is from somebody that was trying new medication or tried to go on new medication. So let's read that and find out more about this. Okay, the title is, I worked up the courage to ask my parents over a work assignment to the point of feeling a shortness of breath and tightening in my chest, as well as a loss of appetite. For my LSAT, which I think is some kind of exam, my parents got me some pills to help with nervousness. There were leftovers and I've had them since August, but didn't use them until today. I had always thought of getting pills for when it's really bad, but was kind of iffy on it. So I worked up the courage and asked my stepdad, who's a doctor, about it. And he was pretty understanding, but said it depended on my mum, because she was super against it. I told him I'm literally 22 and don't need permission. It's just a matter of whether he wants to make it easier for me. He said he understood, but that he would still kind of lecture about how she is against it and how I need to be resilient and not just run to pills to save myself, because I'll end up committing suicide like this kid from my high school. She said that she's been through the worst of things and never had to take pills. And I asked her if she wanted a cookie. I called out my stepdad for being a follower as usual, and they just went on their tirade about how my problems now are nothing and how I have to suck it up and deal with it. I regret opening my mouth and letting them be in a position to echo my doubts and spew such ignorance, but yeah, this is my life. Pretty rubbish.
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot of kind of thoughts about medication, a bit of experience as well. And listening to that story, especially when you're already, struggling with anxiety, it's such a step to, reach out for some sort of help. In this case, realizing that he thought that the medication was what they needed, and to be met with some sort of judgment, it just makes things a lot harder.
Yeah, it does. And I think it's almost like treating somebody like they're stupid, because I think most people that are going on medication understand the risks and benefits. We're not, this person will have already thought about the fact that it could be addictive or about the side effects and stuff. And so they don't need to be reminded of that. They just need support and love, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I think what's interesting surrounding medication is that I find, kind of in my experience, when I've gone to doctors, they've, straight away prescribed medication and they're less quick to prescribe therapy. And I think especially for people with health anxiety like myself, it's very difficult to accept that you might need or you might benefit from medication, especially knowing all the side effects, possible side effects. So I think to build up the courage to actually take them, like, I understand how difficult that is, because I struggled with whether I was going to take medication for many months before I had the courage to do so. And I think, fortunately for me, my family was very supportive. They wanted to see me get better, and they thought, well, you can try something new. If it doesn't work, you can stop. So to not have a supportive kind of family or system, it must be very difficult.
I'm guessing from the story that this person is in the US. So it might be slightly different over here, but I know that, there
Yeah.
are possible ways in which parents might worry, especially because they probably weren't brought up with the same ideology around medication, whereas we probably know many of our friends might be on medication. We're taught about it, not probably in the correct way still, but it's more in the media. It's more like online. People are talking about being on medication. And I'm wondering what kind of medication this is, because I know that I've been on citalopram for many years, and doctors are more reluctant to give out things like Valium, so like diazepam. And I know in the US they give out the worries and concerns from our parents are valid, but the way you speak to people is the only thing that matters. So, treating her like she's a child and saying that she doesn't know what's good for herself and saying she'll end up like the kid from her high school that, obviously sounded really unwell. And the thing that really made me feel quite angry in this was her mum saying, well, I've been through worse. I didn't have to take pills.
Yeah, I think, when it comes to kind of trauma in a sense, or trauma comparison, I feel like there is a tendency that some of the older generation do fall back on, well, we've had it worse, we've been in worse situations, we just kind of buckled up and got through it, so really you should be able to deal with things. But realistically, the world is completely different. Since they were younger, it's always changing. There are new pressures, like probably social media wasn't as big of a thing, and that kind of interconnectivity. So I think you can't really generalize your experience and apply it to everyone.
No.
And just say, well, I got through it, so you have to do it. Because what you really want is to say, I suffered, I don't want you to suffer the way that I did. And, be encouraging of them actually trying something new, trying to help themselves.
100%. It's so frustrating to hear this, that this is the way that your mum reacted. And I also understand that your stepdad in this story, I understand that he did probably have to speak to your mum because, that felt maybe to him like he had that extra responsibility, and for him, he needed to make sure that he wasn't doing something behind your mum's back. So I do understand that aspect of it from him, but the way I'm totally with you on, like, that's the reaction that parents should have is, I'm really sorry to hear that that's what you're going through, and I don't want you to suffer like I did, just like you said. It's not a competition either. It's not like, well, I've actually had it worse than you, so, well, I'm sorry you've had it worse than me. I don't want you to have had it worse than me. And there's also the thing people talk about of generational trauma, and sometimes what your mother goes through and what her mother goes through, that can trickle down into the children and grandchildren. There's loads of like science backing that up, that if your mum is somebody that's going through trauma, if your mum's somebody that's stressed, it can trickle down into the child, and then the child learns how to deal with stress in not a great way, and might pick up on behaviours that the mother has. Not saying it's ever the mother's fault, but that is fact that, and also a lot of it can be genetic, that, people with OCD and with anxiety and stuff, it can be genetic that your child then is more likely to have things like that. So it's obviously just this mother in this story has never had somebody that has reacted kindly towards her mental health. Maybe never had that like secure, loving surrounding her that she needed, and so she doesn't know how to react when her daughter's saying this stuff. It's all learned, isn't it? We don't come out as babies as having prejudices.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think it's a difficult situation to approach, because if you have someone that's kind of shut you down in the sense of just saying, well, I've had it worse, then you kind of say, well, how can I really have a fuller conversation? How can I address this? And how can I make sure our relationship, stays the same? Because you don't want to be dismissed, but you also don't want to be, kind of viewed as aggressive by saying, well, you're being ridiculous kind of thing. So I think it's very difficult to maintain that healthy relationship when you encounter issues like this, because you're obviously trying to make a positive change in your life, trying to improve your mental health. So yeah, I completely sympathize.
Yeah, me too. And I mean, if the mother of this person is listening by any chance, which they're probably not, but, I've been on medication since I was 16, maybe younger. And at first I was prescribed medication that did not agree with me, and then got put on citalopram, which I think is quite a general drug that they put on. Quite a lot of people with anxiety get put on citalopram. I know so many people on citalopram, and it's really, I think, from my experience and people experience around me, it's quite I've never heard of really extreme side effects of it. So it's also about, misinformation and misconceptions, because I've never heard of somebody going on citalopram. I'm sure there are cases, but I've never heard of somebody going on something like citalopram and then, having a very severe reaction. Might not agree with you, just like pain medication or anything else. No, it doesn't agree with everybody. But there's just never a one size fits all for anxiety, and me and you, Kezia, understand how severe anxiety can be and how it can rule your whole entire life and how it can feel like you're stuck. So I can't imagine being in the situations that both of us have been in and not having love and understanding from a parent, because I've also been lucky enough to have parents that really try to understand.
Yeah, absolutely. On your point about medication and side effects, personally, I was on sertraline for a year, and it didn't agree with me at all. It did help to some degree to reduce my panic attacks, but it did give me very graphic nightmares every night. So that was a bad experience, and it did make me more skeptical about medication moving forward. But I spoke to my doctor about it, and she even said to me, these leaflets have to just say everything that, to cover everything in a sense of safety, from a safety perspective, cover all the side effects. And she said, because I was especially worried about blood pressure or low blood pressure, and she said to me, well, I've never known anyone like young your age to actually suffer with anything in terms of low blood pressure from the medication. It's always older people. So I think, even just talking to a doctor, and hopefully they might just speak through any concerns that you have, or maybe they could even speak through concerns with your mother and explain, well, I know that it can be addictive, but there's these things that you can do, or, something to offer reassurance.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's kind of two cases in this mother in this story, and I don't want to kind of be like, she's horrible and, you need to get rid of her. But, it's obviously a very tricky situation. And like you said, the mother could either be open-minded enough to talk to a doctor and say, listen, my daughter wants to go on this medication, but I'm really terrified that it's addictive and I've heard horror stories. And, if that is the road that this mother wants to go down, I think that's really amazing. To have an idea about something but be open enough to changing that idea is a really hard thing that I struggle with personally when it comes to certain things. I'm like, no, I have my beliefs and everyone else can leave me alone. So if somebody to do that, it takes so much courage, and I just think that's amazing. Or, you stay closed off and you don't want to hear other people's ideas, you don't want to know about it. And that's two very different things. And I think, being honest, my parents at first didn't fully understand. They didn't really, I was quite young, and they were kind of like, what is this thing that keeps happening to Emily? We don't really get it. Like, they had never heard of it, but they were open enough to research, to try and understand, to talk to therapists, to talk to different people, to become more aware and more, clued up on it. I think in all walks of life, in all human beings, if we were all more like that, then we'd just be in such a better place, I think.
Yeah, I completely agree. Like, I think that's amazing that you had parents that were really, they wanted to look into things, they wanted to understand. I think that is, the ideal situation for anyone who has like anxiety or other mental health conditions. I think explaining things on your own sometimes is difficult to really express what it's like to actually have the mental health condition, especially anxiety, OCD. Like from personal experience, I can talk about those. And I think it is very difficult, but I think, yeah, if like you said, if everyone was into looking into things and just improving their knowledge so that they can really understand someone better, that would just be such a better world.
It so would. And I think we're all guilty probably of, I know for me when it comes to things like politics, I can be quite guilty of having my view and not wanting to listen to anybody else's view and I put them in a box and say, this person believes in this, which means they are this kind of person. And so I think we're probably all guilty across the board of making prejudgments on the way someone looks or the way they talk or whatever it might be. So, I'm tarnishing myself with this same brush. I think we all need to be more accepting and open-minded as much as possible.
Yeah.
And something like medication, it can be scary for your child to go on medication that you've never heard of and you've heard horror stories of. So in no way is this like a blame game to anybody. It's just about trying your best to be as open as possible.
Yeah, I completely agree. Just to be like you said, to be as open-minded as possible, really approach the situation, clearly go through everything, really take your child's concerns and what they want into consideration as well. Because, like they said, this person is 22 years old and they should be able to make their own decisions as an adult as well. So I think that's definitely a consideration you should have. And I understand the kind of protective nature of parenting, like I can imagine it, but I think at some point you just have to say, okay, well, you're just gonna stand back a bit and support you, even if I don't fully agree.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point. I imagine there's a point in the life of being a parent where you realise that your child is going to make their own decisions and that you can't protect them from everything. And that must be really hard, especially if they're doing something you don't necessarily agree with. But I think if you don't let them try different things and experience the world by themselves, you're at risk of losing them. And that's much more scary than them trying out different things. So that's such a good point that I imagine seeing your baby like going off into the world is really horrible in some ways. I've been like, but no, I can't like protect them from everything. And that can't be easy. But I think it's just such a necessary part of life, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. This whole story is not black and white, and nothing with mental health is ever black and white ever. There's a lot of grey area, and maybe if also to the person that wrote this, I'd say don't give up on your mum yet, because, I think, my parents, if I'd given up on them as soon as they showed any sign of not understanding, we wouldn't be in the position we're in now, where there's a lot of understanding and a lot of support. I know that's quite tricky sometimes, but I think I've heard loads of stories of parents opening up and starting to understand more. So if you have the patience and energy to try again with your mum, then I think there could be an opening.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think just like I have an experience in terms of I'm vegan, and that can be kind of a hot topic sometimes as well. So I think just without, jumping down anyone's throats, but just coming from a place of this is what I believe and this is, what I want to do. And then eventually people are like, oh, like you're not trying to, force anything. You're just trying to live how you want to live. And I think it's opened up a lot of communication, a lot of doors with my family as well. And then they're a lot more open-minded about it. So I think definitely, like Emily said, don't give up. And I think it is just perhaps it could be that there is, accurate and relevant concern from your mum, but it's just slightly misplaced in this circumstance. That's all.
Absolutely. That's exactly right. It sounds like, hopefully anyway, it's coming from a place of love and coming from a place of wanting the best for you. And hopefully that is the case. And, I'm sure there is a point in relationships where you have to say, okay, no, I'm standing up for myself now and I'm doing what I need to do. And maybe you have come to that point that you're saying, I want to now, go to my own doctor and just not include my mum in this, which is totally also fine. But yeah, if you're able to give your mum another chance to be open, then I think that's never going to cause harm. It's only going to be, and if it doesn't work, that's okay. You've tried that, But yeah, thank you so much to the listener that sent in this story. It's been a really good one to talk about, and one that I'm sure so many people can relate to. And thank you so much, Kezia, for coming on. You're absolutely amazing at this.
Thanks for having me on again, and it was a pleasure to read through your story as well.
Yeah, it was. It's such a lovely story. And if you're listening and you'd like to send in a story, we would absolutely love to listen to that story and read it out. I know it can feel quite scary, especially we're anxiety chats. A lot of us have anxiety, but honestly, it's not as scary as you think. And yeah, thank you everybody for listening, and we will see you soon. Bye.